Welcome to another episode of the How to Do Your 20s podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about whiskey, everything whiskey. And I got Rachna from Whiskey Stories with me, who's not only a whiskey expert, but she also runs some really awesome events that she has some whiskey tastings at. So first off, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to start with, why whiskey? Of all the liquors out there, how come you decided whiskey is your favorite?
It's funny, I sort of fell into it, not literally, but, my first day in New York City and America was 9/11, actually, and the job I had for like 20 seconds I lost. I got laid off, and I had a month to find another job or leave the country, and I'd been dreaming about coming here since I was 16, so I started looking for a job, and I found a job in whiskey. And I had never even thought about it before that. And then I took it, and I just loved it. And then I started learning a lot about it. But it wasn't until about 8 or 9 years ago that I actually had my first whiskey.
So you were working in whiskey before you tried the whiskey?
Yeah, which is kind of a strange thing to do. There are a lot of people who do that. If you're just working on the advertising or marketing. I was just nervous, I guess. Up until then, I would say I was a wine drinker. Mm-hmm. So I just remember being at an end-of-year holiday party at work or something, and whiskey shots were brought around, and up until that moment, I hadn't really thought about it. But when I had it, it was so unique to me. It was so intriguing. It felt like a warm hug, first of all. And I just got really fascinated by it. And, there are those moments in your life where you feel like there's something here, and you can't explain it, and it was one of those moments. And I started reading about it. I started getting lost in the stories. I think distillers are some of the most smartest and most humble people I know, and how back in the day they were all family-owned, like grocers were distilling whiskeys and making things like that in Scotland. And it was very interesting to me, where it was actually a very humble place to be. So that's what intrigued me about it. And I feel like it's an art form, because the amount of time and care that's taken to make it, it's just fascinating to me. So that's what I like about it.
Something from your blog I found really interesting is you kind of go into the history and how it's a part of history drinking whiskey, and specifically like George Washington. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That is a story where I'm actually looking into more details about that, so I've just scratched the surface about that one. This is in D.C. There is a distillery, I believe it's called the George Washington Distillery or something like that. And in the beginning, he was trying to ease up taxes, because the people who were distilling or just malting barley were getting heavily taxed. So he was trying to get that eased up, because it was a livelihood that he felt that America could thrive with. So if he wasn't one of the people doing that, it may not have been, the bourbon may not have been thriving like it is right now. So I think that that's so amazing.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about how drinking whiskey is just kind of like being part of history, and when you put it in context like that, it makes like every sip of whiskey I have sound a little bit cooler. Before I was just drinking whiskey, now I'm part of history.
Exactly.
It tastes different to different people. Like the same whiskey could taste different for me and to you, and I kind of wanted to talk about why. Why is that?
So it's a couple of things. One, you can get affected by what you've eaten earlier in the day. So let's say you've had spicy food, that can bring out different notes. Your palate may be more sensitive to certain types of flavors than others, and so you can pick those up quicker. Also, recently, this past Saturday, I did a tasting where I didn't give them a slice of orange to eat, but to experiment with. I just had them smell the orange. And because in their head, it brought the memory of what an orange should smell and taste like, it changed the whiskey.
Interesting.
So that was really cool. So in my tastings, I will do an experimentation part of it, where we experiment with different types of food and all that, and that's just really interesting and intriguing. Also, women and men, their palates are just very different. So women might pick up certain notes that men don't. So I always like to say to women, don't feel nervous if you are sensing something that someone else may not. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that you're picking up certain notes that someone else isn't.
Is this true with all, like, wine, food, everything, or is this more specifically to whiskey?
I don't know if that exists in food, because, rosemary tastes like rosemary tastes like rosemary.
Sure.
Because wine can have that, yes.
Okay.
Because wine, it can depend on the barrels, its age. So basically, barrels, depending on where the tree is from and what liquid was there in the barrel before you put whiskey in it, and it's similar to wine, it can impart different notes. How long you might age something can impart different notes. So I think wine comes close to that too.
Okay.
I would say.
So let's just get into where to start. Like, someone that's never experimented with whiskey before, what should they order? I know that's a hard question.
It's a hard question, and I always say that's like asking me, where should I start on the internet?
So what's the Google, I guess, of the whiskey world?
What's the equivalent of a cat video?
Sure.
It depends. I like to always ask what people drink otherwise. If they're wine drinkers, I try to recommend something like a macallan, which is easier on the palate because it's aged in ex-sherry barrels. So it's got like that smoky and sweet. Something like a Highland Park, which is also similar. And Alison Patel, she's the founder of this French single malt called Breen, Brenne. Now, it's not widely available, but what I like about it is it's a great place to get intrigued by whiskey.
Okay.
So brands like that, I think, where there's a softer end note to it, is a great place to start. And there are a couple of bourbons that I might think that you could start, like Bllet bourbon is a great place to start. What I just described before, they're either scotches or single malts. And then another great way to start with a whiskey is a whiskey cocktail, I would say. Like, try a classic cocktail, like an old-fashioned or a Manhattan. Really get into it, because, those cocktails tend to be a little bit sweet, and you can slowly graduate to trying it on the rocks. And then if a whiskey's smooth enough, you can have it neat.
So let me ask you, what is the difference between whiskey, bourbon, and scotch? Because I have no idea.
Okay, they're all whiskeys.
Okay.
Bourbon is a whiskey, scotch is a whiskey. So bourbon is American, and for it to qualify as a bourbon, it has to be made in the U.S., it has to be aged for at least 4 years, and the barrel can't have had anything else in it, so it's first fill barrels. And if it's bourbon, it has to be 51% corn at least. If it's rye whiskey, it's the same, but it has to be at least 51% rye.
Okay. Yeah, Scotch?
Scotch is from Scotland.
Okay.
And I made a mistake. Bourbon doesn't have to be aged at least 4 years. That's Scotch.
Okay.
Yeah, bourbons, like, there are new bourbons now that have only been aged 2 years, things like that. Like Hudson's Baby Bourbon is only aged 2 years. Scotch has to be aged at least 4 years. It needs to be from Scotland. It has to have had something else in the barrels. They're usually not first filled barrels to qualify as Scotch. So Scotch is usually aged in ex-sherry barrels or ex-bourbon barrels. So that's another partnership that I like. A lot of bourbons, once they're aged, America will send those barrels to Scotland, and they'll age Scotch in there.
Interesting. So if it doesn't meet the criteria for bourbon or for Scotch, then is it just called whiskey? Or
yeah, it is.
Okay.
Like, that's what Tennessee whiskey is. It's from Tennessee, and they change a few things, so you can't call it a bourbon. And then similarly to Scotch, that's why you see, Breen is not from Scotland, so it's called a French single malt. It's not called a Scotch. And then single malt Scotches There's single malt scotches and blended scotch in Scotland, and then those are the ones that qualify. There is a Scotch association that will slap you on the wrist if you don't meet the criteria.
Interesting. So how do you feel about the more common ones like a Maker's Mark, a Jim Beam, or a Jack Daniels?
So I love Maker's Mark. I think that go for it. You know, it's I love that seal on top, the red seal. It's part of history in the U.S. It's a great graduation from something like a Jim Beam or Jack Daniels. You know, I know Jack and Coke is like a staple in America. Everybody says that, and at some point, if you're ready to move on from that, Maker's Mark is a great place to be, and then you can graduate to some other things too. I think it's fine. I think keeping Maker's Mark in your repertoire is great.
You said that Maker's Mark is part of history. Is there a story there?
I just feel like it's been there for so long. I haven't found a story that stood out a whole lot as opposed to some of the other big ones that are out there, but I just love the way the red seal looks. It's old. They used to do it. They've kept to the original seal, and I think that's so cool.
That is cool. So now we have an idea of what whiskeys to order. So you finally ordered this nice whiskey, and let's say you got it, you know, straight up, no cocktail. How do you taste it to get the full enjoyment out of it?
So are you ordering it neat?
Yes.
Just straight up?
Sure.
So I'll demonstrate with my glass.
Okay.
My water glass. So with wine, you know, you kind of put your nose in there completely. But because whiskey is higher proof, if you do that, you'll just get the alcohol burn. And whiskey has so many subtle, wonderful notes, like wine does too, that you want to experience that. So you kind of tilt your head slightly, and you smell it lightly like this. And what this does is it takes the proof of the alcohol kind of goes this way, and so your nose is under that. So you get to smell some of the other notes in there.
It's really
so it's a good way to start smelling whiskey that way, because then you will get other notes instead of just the alcohol burn in your sinus.
And when you actually take a sip, is there anything special, or you just go ahead and take a sip?
There's a couple of things you can do. You can, as you take a small sip, you can open your mouth just slightly so air comes in as you're swallowing, and that opens it up for you a little bit, you know, so you can get those notes. There's also something called a Kentucky Chew. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No idea.
It's like you drink the whiskey and then you go...
Oh, interesting.
And so I don't do that, but it's something you can do with a bourbon to kind of get some notes out, you know?
That's really cool. So do you recommend getting it neat or on the rocks when you order a whiskey?
So I believe you shouldn't let anyone tell you how to drink your whiskey. Now, because of the care that's been taken, I wouldn't say, you know, put half of it and put half a Diet Coke in it. Or if you are, just don't tell me. Mm-hmm. But you can drink it neat if it's smooth enough. You know, like a 15-year-old whiskey can be so smooth. You can drink it that way. You can put it with a splash of water, or you can drink it with a couple of ice cubes. If it's a whiskey I haven't had before, I'm that person at the bar who will ask, can I have it neat? Can I have a glass of ice and a glass of water separately? Because then I like to try it and see how I like it, you know, which combination, and then that way I know how it tastes. So I always say, just sip it neat just a little bit just to see how you feel about it, and then and if you want to experiment, go ahead.
Why water? Doesn't it just kind of dilute the flavor?
Not necessarily. For whiskeys that are, you know, under 18 years or so, and certain blended whiskeys that, you know, have been, sorry, my cat is really excited about the headphones. And then, so what you can do with that is a little bit of room temperature water opens up other flavors. It also takes down some of the alcohol notes, so you might experience certain things from it that you may not have if you were tasting it neat. It also allows you to fit it to your palate. For example, some people might think a whiskey that's aged in ex-sherry barrels is just a little tad too sweet for them. So if they add a little bit of water, it takes some of those notes away and pulls out a smokier note if it's a Scotch, and you could bring that out. So it also depends on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to enhance a flavor or diminish it?
Okay. And something else about whiskey I find really interesting is the idea that spices can be added and really kind of add to the flavor of a whiskey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite parts of it is you can do a lot of things with whiskey, right? You can infuse it with certain things. And in that sense, gin is done like that, where you infuse it with herbs and spices. Otherwise, it also depends on the type of barrel that's used. And that brings out certain spicy notes that other, or it can be the grain. Like for rye, it tends to be spicy because rye is a little bit on the spicy side. So that's kind of interesting too. So I love that idea of using different types of grain or certain types of wood that brings out certain spicy notes.
So they don't actually like cut up some cinnamon and throw it in there, do they?
Some whiskeys can be infused because, Fireball has cinnamon flavor. It's whiskey liqueur, it's not actually whiskey, but they'd have put cinnamon flavoring in it.
Okay.
So it depends on what the master blender is doing. Usually when you age it, it's the wood.
Talking about like Fireball and spices and notes and...
Yeah, a lot of whiskeys don't necessarily infuse with spices beforehand. A lot of cocktails will do that. I have an infuser here, which is a gift for a friend of mine. I can show it to you if you like. So you can do a lot of experimentation like that. Most whiskeys, like Spice Tree from Compass Box, that you get some Indonesian spicy notes in it, and a lot of that has to do with the type of tree and barrels that they've used.
Okay, so like when people say that, I have this note or that note, it's always because of the wood. It's never because, like I know sometimes with beers they might throw in a little bit of like orange peel or something to give it some flavor, but that's not the case with whiskeys, usually.
More often than not, no. It's usually the wood that imparts notes because the wood is the art that comes into it and how they distill it, so... More often than not, they may not put spices in there. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. A lot of whiskeys out there do experiment with things. What ends up happening with that, though, is if you add something else, depending on what you've done with it, you're forced to call it a flavored whiskey.
Oh,
That's
okay.
the problem. So, like cinnamon, if you add cinnamon or you add rosemary, and there's enough of it, you have to call it flavored whiskey, and a lot of people don't want to do that. So they don't add that, so that's where the challenge comes in. For example, Kings County Distillery here, they make their own moonshine, which is essentially unaged corn whiskey, and they use ex-cocoa husks from a chocolate maker, and it's delicious, but because they use that, they have to put flavored. So he has it in quarts,
That's funny. Yeah, so another thing I wanted to talk about actually was blended whiskeys, and what is a blended whiskey? What do they blend it with to make it blended?
So most whiskeys are harmonized or mixed. Single malt just means single distillery. That means it's from one distillery. That doesn't mean that they didn't open different barrels and put different whiskeys in there to marry it and harmonize it so the taste is consistent.
Okay.
A big brand like Glenlivet has been around for so long, people expect a Glenlivet 12 to taste a certain way. So their master blenders will, they'll figure out that's their job, to make the taste consistent. Blended Scotch can have whiskeys from all around. It doesn't have to just be your distillery. And Johnny Walker has a lot of blends in there. And so, like I said, whiskey before was a family-owned business. It wasn't the industries that you see today. So because they were family-owned, people would mix and match. There were that many distilleries out there. People would mix liquids to see what would happen, and so it wasn't a big deal. So back in the day in history when Johnny Walker wasn't even Johnny Walker, it was Cardell, it was a different era. So they were blending different types of liquids. So it can have various distilleries that are not just yours.
And what about craft whiskey? I know craft whiskey is kind of becoming a more popular thing. What are your thoughts on craft whiskey, and what is it?
Craft whiskey is a new buzzword. You know, it's like saying anything that's local, kind of like local grocery, local shoes. It's like that. It's small family owned, and it can be younger. So craft can mean it's a small family owned business, or because there's such a demand for whiskey, they're trying to find more innovative ways to have whiskeys that's younger. So, like I told you, Hudson Baby Bourbon is only aged 2 years. You know, and if you go to Hudson Distillery, it's in upstate New York, they use smaller barrels for concentrated aging, so they don't have to age it as long as some of the other barrels that are bigger. So there's a lot of different experimentation that you can do, and in that sort of realm, people are breaking a few rules and trying to do different things, you know, so it's kind of an exciting place to be. It also has its drawbacks because a lot of people who don't know a lot about whiskey may make whiskey that, you know, and I don't think that that's such a terrible thing, but there may be people who might say, I don't know if this tastes good or not. You know, is this supposed to taste good? I don't know, because that's a very common thing to say, right? So there are a lot of whiskeys out there that are new, and when you try them, you really don't know whether this tastes good or not, because it's younger. So that's why I always like to say, try them. Again, it's your palate, and then try some of the older ones and see where you fit in. And as you go through it, you'll develop a palate saying, oh, I think this one tastes a little too young for me, or it's just right. You know.
Anything you want to add about whiskeys, how to taste whiskeys, ordering whiskey, anything like that?
Nothing besides what I said, you know. I would say don't be afraid to experiment with it. Now, I know you can't go to a bar with a fanny pack, which has chocolate, cherries, and an orange, which is what I do. Or I always say maybe you'll do that, and across the room your soulmate is doing the exact same thing. That's a great story to tell the kids, you know. So maybe that'll happen, but chances are it won't. So, you know, experiment with it. Don't be afraid of it, because it's such a great spirit, and there's so much spirit in how it's made that why not?
Great answer. And I want to talk about whiskey stories a little bit. So tell us, what is Whiskey Stories and everything about it?
Whiskey Stories is my education company, and whiskey education company. And I called it Whiskey Stories because I love storytelling. And so I felt like it was a coming together of the two things that I liked, whiskey and storytelling. I mean, there are other things I like, of course, but those just fit well together. And also, it's a great place for a platform. I look at it more than just, most whiskey classes are about the whiskey. I love to include other entrepreneurs, like music artists, you know, authors, fitness instructors, because whiskey can be healthy if drunk in moderation. Just a platform for the stories that make people interesting. You know, our little quirks, and sometimes whiskeys have little quirks, and stories about doing things your way, you know, when everything says you probably shouldn't.
Do you have an example of one of these type of stories?
Highland Park is probably my favorite story because it's from Orkney, which is the northernmost island of Scotland, and Magnus, who was the founder, he created this whiskey. He was a church official by morning and a smuggler by night. So history has that he used to store the whiskey barrels in the pulpit of the church. So it's one of the most legendary whiskeys in the world. It's one of the oldest whiskeys in the world, and it started out on a bit of a crazy note, and I like that. You know, and if you taste it, it's so complex and unique that I just think it's great.
That's great. And how do people, if they want to be a part of Whiskey Stories, how do they find out more?
Usually by contacting me. I haven't completed a year yet, so I was doing word of mouth and through Facebook. Now I'm going to be launching my website, and slowly I should have a roster of classes in there so people can figure out which one they want to attend. But for now, I'm posting on Facebook and things like that. I've been very blessed. Classes have been selling out in days. So I've been kind of keeping it a little bit strictly with word of mouth, because if I did more, I probably wouldn't be able to keep up with it. Mm-hmm. And I like that it's small.
It's just in New York, correct? For now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to add about anything we talked about today?
I don't think so. I would just say enjoy whiskey.
And any advice for the listeners out there, the people in their 20s, anything like that?
I would say take your time with it. There's so much love and passion that goes into making a whiskey. And there are some that you can shoot as shooters, and why not? But a lot of whiskeys, just take your time with it. Any good thing that's worth considering, you learn about slowly. At least in my experience, that's been the case. So I think whiskey's the same way.
Great answer. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, make sure you hit the big red subscribe button down below. You can also check me out on Facebook and on Twitter, and I release a new video every Monday, and by hitting that subscribe button, you'll get those new videos every Monday. And this is really a podcast. It's also a website. You can check out the website. It's howtodoyour20s.com. I'll put a link right over here as well. And what it's all about is trying to improve your life. And we specifically focus on things that people in their 20s are interested in. So make sure you like the video if you liked it. Subscribe. Like us on Facebook and Twitter, whatever. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again on another video.